You're listening to
The Classroom Collaborative
podcast with your hosts, Deedee Wills
and Rock
and Adam Peterson.
Here we go.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Classroom Collaborative podcast. I am Adam Peterson.
Hello, I am Deedee Wills.
And we are happy that you are joining us again.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you,
I'm
Deedee.
a little bit sick. It makes me sad.
I was telling Deedee ahead of time before we recorded that I was shoveling feet and feet of snow yesterday, and I probably should have had warmer clothes on or some boots of some type instead of my tennis shoes. But
oh my God, really? You were wearing tennis shoes?
Well, I wasn't like standing in deep snow. I was just out in the cold. I think it's, what does Alexa say right now? It's -7 right now here. It's ridiculous.
No.
We've had like -30 temperatures with the wind chill overnight. So we have all of our water like sinks dripping, all the showers dripping because there's warnings that your pipes will freeze.
Yeah.
It's insane. I'm so
It
sick
is.
of snow.
It is. Well, and I feel for it. In Illinois and, Colorado, we kind of know what to do.
Right.
We know to do that. We know to have, some things on hand. We know to fill up our bathtubs when we have bad water, just in case we lose our water. But those poor people down south who've never seen this.
I know.
It's really, really hard. It's really hard. So hopefully if you're listening and you are down in the south and suffering a winter like you've never seen before, we're thinking of you.
I feel like there's such a range of emotions going on too. Like all of our friends that live in the South, I keep seeing posts. Like I saw a post of one that was huddled under a blanket by a fireplace. And then our mutual friend, Melissa Leach, I saw she posted like her boys were rolling down hills outside. And then Kristen, our friend, posted that she was shoveling buckets of snow just to flush their toilets because the water and power is out. And it's so crazy to think. I mean, and it's one of those things like people here are like, oh, it's just snow, but we're prepared for it. We have snow plows and we have things like that to.
Yeah, our tires are meant to go on snow.
That's right.
All-wheel drive, and it is really challenging when you're not set up. So we're thinking about you guys.
Yeah, this is the second. We're going on day 2 now that it hasn't snowed. Like we've been lucky. Yesterday the sun came out. It's just there's a lot of snow on the ground, but someone posted something that said, "Whoever's shaking this snow globe, please stop." Because and I felt like every day for the past 3 weeks it snowed a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
It's insane.
We're supposed to get 3 to 6 inches today, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, there were some of the suburbs like within an hour of me that got like 13, 14 inches the other night. It's
a lot.
Crazy. Yeah. So the kids were home yesterday. Trisha was home teaching from home yesterday. It's I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of nice. We were all home the last couple of days and
it's nice when you don't have to worry about them being out in it, when you have them close at hand.
Right.
So I'm shuffling papers here because we're going to talk today about another great article that I've come across, this time from Edutopia. And it's called Why Students Should Write in All Subjects. And I thought that might be a good thing to kind of talk about because, I love writing. You love writing. We love talking about writing. But I guess I never really thought about it across. I mean, I do think about it across all subjects, but we've never really talked about it across all subjects, right? Some things lend itself really well for writing, and some things maybe you have to think a little bit more for. But I really enjoyed this article. Of course, we'll link it in the show notes also. So if you want to go back and watch it, no, you're not. If you watch it, it's not going to nothing's going to happen. But if you read it, it's going to be great.
It'll be there. They won't watch the article, but they could watch us talk and then read the article.
There you go.
I got where you were going.
Early. That's what I meant. So early.
No, I was excited to see this article come through in the ones you shared too, because writing, as most people that have listened to us talk for any sort of amount of time know that's a passionate subject of both of ours. We both speak on it and present on it, and it's one of those things too. I was kind of the same way when I read it. I'm like, I feel like I did some writing across subjects, but this really goes into some detail of the study behind the why and how it can have a long-lasting effect to do it that way. And I know I've done little things, right? Like we've always written during math when we've done like an analysis of a pattern we made or something, you know what I mean? But some of the ideas in here are really, really cool ideas to make the memory stick, right?
Right. And that, right out the back, that's one of the things they talk about it is that it helps to strengthen the memories by writing about it. And the article goes on to say that it helps consolidate the information into long-term memory, which makes sense. If you have to, it's one thing to listen and have an internal understanding of it, right? Your internal voice. And then of course, if you talk about it, then you have a deeper understanding. But then when you get to the writing about it, it takes it just one more level. So
I think the first example it gave was my favorite one. This says this 10th grade math teacher in Massachusetts, a math teacher in high school, was doing a congruent triangles lesson, but didn't start with calculators or protractors. Instead, she had students draw a treasure map and write detailed directions using landmarks as a guide to a buried treasure. And like, what a great idea! Like to write those guides using triangles on the map. And I think those are things that all of us have said, like, you know what, I've done something like that. And I tell teachers all the time when I'm speaking to them, like, whenever you see me speak or listen to one of my sessions, like, I hope, my sincere hope is these are things you're already doing as a teacher, because I don't want to be like some genius with these, like groundbreaking ideas most of the time. I just share ideas. Or B, these are things that you've done in the past, but maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that I had done a writing activity like that, right? So that's one of those things that, like, I remember years ago we were doing a community unit in kindergarten, and we were writing, about their favorite place in the town that we live in, or they were writing directions how to get home, or drawing directions, and those little things like that are what this article kind of talks about, how it can strengthen a lot of your not just in the writing subject, but across curriculums.
Right.
Right. I like how you said that. Right. Yes.
Right. All right. And then it also talks about it being a metacognitive tool, so it can help to reveal gaps in understanding.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things in one of the sessions I always talk about is, we respond in writing to reading. So there'd be a reading comprehension kind of prompt, and then students are asked to respond. And it is hard when you have 20 students to get around to everyone. But if you have some kind of artifact writing to show their understanding, then you can get a better glimpse into each student's response, right?
Right. Yep. Right. We're going to say that word so many times during this topic. No, I think that's true. It's funny when you mentioned having so many students get around to too. I know as a kindergarten teacher, that was one of the things I struggled with. I always felt like, and I say this in my writing presentation, like I never felt like I was a great writing teacher. And when I felt that way, I think it was because I wasn't really putting emphasis on it, right? Like it was one of those things that it was the last thing that I was putting into my plans. Like, oh my gosh, we haven't done any like official writing today, right? That little mind shift was when I started thinking, well, we've done it, we did it during our morning message, and we wrote a response like you just mentioned, Deedee, or we wrote an analysis about something in math. So we had done writing. It wasn't just a core time. And the thing that really made writing stick out for me, and I felt like made me a better teacher, was when I put more emphasis on the achievement of things we were doing rather than just the step-by-step every day of writing. And what I mean by that is there's a quote that I use in my writing topic. I'm not going to remember it right now, and it's on my other computer downstairs, but something about it, how education is more about, there's another word in there besides achievement. I wish I could remember this.
It would have been brilliant.
Accomplishments. That's what it is. So education is it's something along the lines of like getting me to understand that, yes, I was accomplishing a lot. Like we were checking off boxes left and right. And writing, right? Like I was meeting all these standards, but I never really felt like we were achieving anything as writers. And that was the big difference. And I think that, like when we can say you've achieved this, you've become a writer, that's so much more important than just checking boxes to say that you met this standard, met this standard, met this standard. And I think it was when I shifted to, we're writing all day long, and that's what we need to put an emphasis on, rather than this 15-minute block of time where I'm teaching one specific writing skill, which, don't get me wrong, is important. And that's kind of how I laid out my day. We had a writing block where we taught whatever our mini lesson was, But then we tried to tie writing into everything to really achieve that as young authors.
Yeah, I think, and I think that there's lots of ways that you can, like you say, work that in. And when you have it when it's written, you can always go back and kind of refer to it and look for growth, and also look for where students have maybe has some misconceptions. If you're talking about the concept that you're working on, and I'm not talking about the writing skills like capital letters, punctuation,
Right.
that sort of thing, but the concept that you're teaching. So if it's science, if it's reading comprehension, if it's math, you can really look in and see, are they able to, one, do they understand it? And if it appears that they don't, is it because they don't understand it, or they're not able to convey it yet with writing? So, and of course, we always talk about, Adam, you and I always talk about how writing in kindergarten, or for students who are maybe second language learners, having that be an illustration is perfect, right? That's a great way for them to convey meaning.
Well, I really like the way this article started too, with the first tip. So when you mentioned these are strategies to help check for understanding of writing across curriculum. So like why we should be doing this, and it's good studies in here. And the first one about strengthening memory was great. And I know when we hear that, like strengthening memories, we think, oh my gosh, we write about memories all the time, but that's not really what this is saying. This is getting to us to understand and remember stuff. And the example they used was one that fascinates me. It says this type of stuff is the same cognitive mechanism that explains why practice tests are effective. In 2014, there was a study that showed that students who took low stakes practice tests in science and history scored 16% percentage points higher on their final exams than students who just study the material. And I thought that was one of those things like, oh my gosh, like how often do we just say, all right, let's do a quick review, and then we assess our students, right?
Right.
Where if we had them actually performing something for practice, studies have shown that can grow. And it went on to say that writing about a topic can encourage them to process that information at a deeper level rather than just talking about it, or reviewing that topic.
Yep. I'm with you.
I thought that was a pretty cool thing that I read. And, you don't think about those things as you're doing them as a teacher, you just,
right.
I know, like if we were going to do, I don't know, like a math test, a topic math test in kindergarten, we would do a quick review. Maybe we'd play a game, but I never really thought about the fact that maybe I didn't have my kids actually practicing specific questions or writing down answers to questions. I wonder, would that have triggered something in the students that needed it more if they were actually writing down answers rather than just us doing a whole group review,
Right. Well, and I think, and I'm thinking about my own classroom, my own students. We don't really have, I'm getting a feedback. You getting a bounce back?
I'm not, sorry.
That's okay.
Is it me?
Yeah, I could hear you, I think maybe on your end. Okay, let me start again. When I would do assessments in my classroom, we didn't have, in kindergarten, we didn't have like a state test. I know that there's iReady, there's all kinds of little tests that are out there now, that for right or wrong, that's a whole nother episode, whether we should be doing that in kindergarten. But I'm wondering if that would be an example of where a practice test would be a good idea. I mean, I think I'm thinking back to certain types of tests that we had. We used a program called Reading Eggs, where students would test in so that they would know which level to go into. And I would sit there and watch my students, and they were taking this like test in, and they were clicking all the things, and they were all of a sudden they're on level 1, and I'm like, okay, this is a fluent reader, and they're on level 1, and they're like, right, they're with that little ant. If you don't know the program, there's like this little funny ant. Anyhow. And so I'm watching them do this, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, stop, you just like, stop clicking, listen to what they're asking you.
Right.
And so, that might be something where if we did a whole group practice test, maybe that would help them reflect more of an accurate result, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, just the ability to just click, and my son was one, and this could be a whole nother topic if we talk about like assessments online, when you're not sitting with a teacher, just like whole class assessments, right?
Yes,
my son we were doing an assessment in kindergarten, and I remember he was in the classroom right next door to me, and his teacher afterwards had said, like, Landon really did well. He was the first one done on our test today. And it's a test. I'm not going to mention it because it's one that I don't agree with to be used. But anyway, he gets in the car after school that day, and I'm like, hey, buddy, your teacher said you rocked that test today. And he goes, it was easy, Dad. And I'm like, well, that's awesome, buddy. Like, you were the first one done. He goes, yeah. And he's 5 years old time. He goes, and it was a math one. That whatever this section of this test was, it was a math one. They did. And he is he's in high math now in 4th grade. He's a math whiz. I mean, the kid is better at math than I am. And anyway, he's in the car, he's 5 years old, and I said, so you must have done really well. He goes, it was easy, Dad. I figured out you didn't have to listen to what they were saying. As soon as you picked one, you could click next. So I just picked them all, and I clicked, and he scored the lowest score out of all the kindergartners that year. Like every single kindergartner.
You're like, we need to set up an IEP meeting with you.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, that proves right there that type of assessment is not a valuable tool for a 5-year-old child, right? Like,
right. Approach it a different way. We need to approach that one in a different way.
But same thing. He just click, and he's like, I'm done. I finished.
This is amazing. Yeah. Well, this article really is about the writing, different types of writing. So thank goodness that's really not something that you would see happening in a kindergarten classroom.
Right.
Their ability to type is like that's a whole nother episode. I remember going to the computer lab, and like the students are like touching this monitor. I'm like, honey, no, it's not. It doesn't work that way. I use this. It's called a keyboard. It's a keyboard. This is called a mouse. And they were like, what's going on? They're like, looking at the touchpad. Anyhow, bless. So the 5 strategies they were talking about, though, I thought were kind of interesting. So one of them was a wonder journal. So it'd be just a chance for them to put down any of those things that they're wondering, a chance for them to just kind of have a free flow of thought around an idea, right?
Right.
I
like this one too. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I know it mentioned a 5th grade example in the article. If you listeners read it, but I was starting to think of the ways that we could do that with kindergarten. Like maybe for your young writers, it's not a writing, right? Because we need to remember that not all kids are ready to I mean, if we think about what writing is, writing down words and sentences and spaces and stories, I know some of my kindergartners could tell amazing stories through pictures, right? And at our age level, that's something we need to remember. I know a mutual friend of ours, Donna White, who's a phenomenal speaker. Yeah. I was watching her speak one time, and she said something that really hit home with me. I was a young teacher when I saw her do this, and she said, we need to stop focusing so much and helping students, put letters and words on paper, because then we're doing the work for them. And when you remember that if a child can draw a picture and tell us what's happening in that picture, then they're on their way to becoming a writer. They're not there yet as far as standards go, with putting letters to words and words to sentences. But if they can tell you the story, they're on their way to becoming an author, because they can describe what's happening in the picture. And it really hit home with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many times that I'm like, a child will draw an amazing picture, and I'm like, well, let's go add a sentence. And they look at me like, I can't. Like, they don't know how to do that yet. Mm-hmm. And we remember that they're still a growing writer at that stage, right? Like that's why we have things like picture books, because picture books can tell a story. So while this one talks about these wonder journals is actually writing down questions, maybe your wonder journal in kindergarten could be drawing pictures of questions you might have about whatever topic is.
Exactly. As long as you, I think I feel like the way that we want to approach writing is to invite students to work on their transcription skills, and really work on that, at certain times. Writer's Workshop is a great opportunity. Interactive writing is a great opportunity to do that. In your small group writing, there is a great time to do that. And then during these other times for writing, we want to invite students to do that, but it may not be the emphasis of doing that particular skill, right? So I think over time, they'll go hand in hand when they see themselves as being able to make their meaning more clear when they have transcription skills on the paper, when they're able to see, oh, when I put down letters and sounds, it made it more clear for my reader. Then we'll transfer over to other domains. But I also feel that there are some students where that skill is going to come really late, and we still want to make them feel and see themselves, and not just feel and see themselves, but actually be a writer through those illustrations. One of the things that they said about these Wonder journals is that we want to make sure that they understand that wonderings lead to thinking outside of the box, which leads them to be critical thinkers. So there is a value, not just let's just spend time. It's helping to develop that ability to think critically, which I feel like is something that we really want to foster, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's one of the, as I read this article again, like, and I keep looking through, Augie just yawned so loud. Did you catch that on your end? He's got the loudest.
He was doing it like a gut.
He does his little like yawns, and he stretches so big. Sorry, I don't know if it came through or not. No, he's looking at me like, "What, man? I'm tired."
What, man?
Anyway, as I'm reading this, I'm just like, "Gosh, I wish I would have done this when I was still in the classroom." Right, and I'm thinking of all these different types of journals that they have, and I know something that came to mind was our friend Kim Adsit. I remember seeing her speak about journaling a lot, and she had journaling down to this amazing routine with her kids, where like they all had a different journal for a different day of the week, or like their weekend journal was in a little pocket folder. And I'm just thinking, like, man, now with like 3 subject or 5 subject notebooks out there, because a lot of this is just free writing, right? This isn't prompted. These Wonder journals are their thoughts. I'm thinking how easy it would be to go get a 3 subject notebook, you know, and label the first subject Wonder. And the kids, anytime they had something they wanted to put in their Wonder journal, they flip to a blank page and they can draw or write away. And I know that I used like just spiral bound notebooks in my classroom all the time. We called them their busy books. And it was for if we were doing, you know, like when we were writing a list, my kids were writing too. And that was one of the rules we had. If I'm writing, you're writing. And some of them were writing down the words. Some of them were drawing pictures if we were brainstorming letters, right? Like some might be writing words that start with that letter. Some might be drawing pictures. And then there was so many times that they were like, can I go get my busy book out and draw some pictures about this? I'm like, yeah, go. Like, if you want to practice that, go for it, you know? So we need to remember sometimes it's not this big fancy thing that we need to give our kids. Sometimes it's just some pencil and paper, and they can write away.
Spiral notebooks, more than one in their desk, makes me say bad words. I'm just going to say it out loud, because I don't know what happens. I don't know what kind of monkey business happens in that desk. But 2 spiral notebooks, they make notebook love. I'm just saying. And all of a sudden, they're all attached. So
I feel like that's a children's book waiting to happen right there.
I know. The time my notebooks fell in love. So I always use composition notebooks.
Yes.
So those worked really well also. And then I had 3 different notebooks, because I had some of them we just used like a lot. You know, we had our math journal, ELA journal, which were prompts that they would respond to. And then we would just have, what I would do is I created tabs in the middle of them for them. So, and you could do it really simple by just taking a Post-it note and doing this kind of ahead of time, and then just kind of folding it on the edge, right? And then taping it down on both sides so that you have a tab, so that they can do the math in the front and the ELA in the back, or vice versa. And so you could do the same thing.
Deedee Wills.
Huh?
You're so smart.
Hey, you know, I've been on this earth for a long time. But I love doing that, because sometimes those composition notebooks, for me, they worked better. Just because my OCD is very strong, very strong. So
they rip the spiral out of it.
Oh,
like, my journal broke. I'm like, that doesn't just happen.
I can't hear you. Oh my God. They ripped the cover off, and then all those little things are everywhere. Those little paper things drives me crazy. So with composition notebooks, this is a blog post that I've had for those of you listening. I use different colored duct tape on the spine, so that they could easily find their blue one was this journal. The purple one was this one. When I first started doing that, there was like really ugly silver, really ugly red, really ugly blue. And now they have all these bright colors. So it's kind of awesome.
Right.
So you could have maybe at the beginning of the year, when you're thinking about, you know, how your journals are going to look, maybe you get 2 journals, 2 composition notebooks, put 2 different color duct tape on the spine, add a tab or 2, depending on how much you want to use it, or how much you're going to want to put in there. Or maybe, maybe you don't even need to have tabs for these different sections that we're going to talk about, but I like to have them for certain things. I always called mine my thinking journals. And so that's where we would bring it for small group, for reading response, for all the things. So it's basically the same thing. My thinking journal, I did not have tabs. I just opened to the next blank page, and that seemed to work pretty good.
Well, I really like how they said, I'm thinking with more with these Wonder journals that could easily be in a composition notebook. But the last sentence of the little part about these is what stuck out to me. So it said the teacher had his students, he or she, write down anything that they were confused or curious about. And I think that's a great way to explain it to a kindergarten teacher or a kindergarten or primary student. Like anything you want to know more about, maybe, and the cool part about this, I think, and now I wish I would have done these if I'm back in the kindergarten classrooms, I'm going to do a Wonder journal, because you're going to get so many different wonders here, right? Like you might see something out of your students that you didn't know they were thinking about. Maybe some of your students who are really interested in whatever your math topic is, if you have them wonder about math, like they might show you some stuff that they know that you might not know they know, right? So I really think that's a cool idea. Just have them draw pictures of things they want to learn or that they're really curious about, and you'll get a lot more idea of what they're interested in that way too.
I know. I was thinking, if you're thinking about animals and their needs, that standard, and you were working on that standard, right? And maybe you have a set unit that you wanted to use that used these 5 animals or something. And then a student puts in they're wondering about this particular animal you've never even thought about before, how that could completely shift the energy in your classroom, because chances are, in kindergarten and first grade and second grade and third grade, there might be some overlap of, we studied polar bears in first grade and second grade and third grade, right? And yet there's so many other animals that could be looked at. Anyhow, that's just something I was thinking about. I wonder what the horn of the narwhal is made out of. If you're talking about an Arctic animal or something like that, is it a horn? Is it a bone? Is it an antler? What is that? Is it like an elk, or is it like a deer, or is it like, anyhow, those are just some things I was thinking would help to add a level of energy into your classroom. And at the same time, validate students who have maybe some different thoughts. I had a student who his parents were both ecologists and natural history teachers. And so he knew everything. Whenever I do KW, I'm like, okay, honey, you're gonna be quiet, because we're gonna ask everybody what they know. Because otherwise, I'd be like, okay, now we're done. Because he would know everything. So
he makes his own KWL chart.
He does his own KWL. So, but he knew like everything. He would just like demonstrate it. Loved this kid.
That's awesome. I mean, how cool is that?
It was pretty awesome.
But I think that's one thing too, that writing is one of those subjects that allows children to be that way, right? Like,
yes,
if we're teaching a math topic, it's a little bit harder to say, okay, I know you're past this, go do this work page, right? Like math or reading are those things that need some direct instruction more so, I think, than writing, because writing is so free, right? Like, yes, we have many lessons that we need to teach, handwriting, and we need to teach what makes a sentence, or we need to teach how we can put words together. But it's one of those subjects where if a child, like your example, is ready to just rock, like hand him a piece of paper and let him go to town, right? Just let him do it.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I think that's a cool. I know when you were talking about animals too, animals is one of those things that is so universally loved by anyone, right? Whether they're a dog person, a cat person, or they love exotic animals, whatever it may be, that I think anytime you can do a writing topic or prompt around animals, you're golden. Like, you're never going to have a child who's like, no, I don't want to write about an animal, And I think that's an important thing to remember too, that nothing in any of our standards, don't get me wrong, I love prompts. I love getting kids to think, about a topic, but nothing in any of our writing standards that you look at ever tells us what these children have to write about, right? Like, it tells us we have to teach them how to be a writer and skills. But when we can just let kids write about what they want to write about, we're going to see a lot more a lot more response, I think.
Yeah. I mean, when they write what they want to write about, they have energy for it.
Yeah, I had a quote on I actually had a poster on my wall of a quote that I came up with, and I put it in my writing session. That says, "If you write about what you love, you're going to love to write." And I tried to get the kids to understand that. Like, yeah, I'm going to teach you, that sometimes we're going to write about what we did in the fall, or sometimes we're going to write about our favorite winter activity. But when we do that, you need to think about what you love to do, right? Like, I'm not going to say you have to write about what you like to do in the snow, because maybe some of you don't like to play in the snow, right? Like, what I mean, that's just an example. What kid doesn't like to play in the snow? But when you mentioned animals, that's what got me thinking about that. Like,
kids in Dallas right now, I think, don't like
that's like, I'm not going to tell all my kids they have to write about a dog, right? Like,
correct.
We can write about animals, but we can do it in a wonder type of way. Like, what do you want to know about animals?
We have to open that space. Students need to know how to answer a prompt. If I ask you a question and then you write about something completely different, that's not going to fare well for you in life. However, they definitely need to learn how to write into a prompt. But they also need to have these moments when they can just have these other thoughts. Another thing that they talked about in this article was travel journals, which I thought would be pretty interesting. If we're learning about something about history, or maybe a biography, which I guess is history as well. Maybe, having imagine you're traveling alongside this particular person, or you are somehow in this moment, or if you're learning about landforms. Because, I mean, who doesn't love to learn about that?
Well, if it's a volcano or something, of course.
Oh, that's true.
But I think that travel journal explains exactly what you just said about prompts, right? Like, because you could do a prompt about, imagine you're traveling to a new place, but then let the child pick that place, right? And write about what's important to them. So yes, you're giving them prompts, but you're also adding in some free writing there. I think that's just an important thing to remember, that as teachers, sometimes I feel, and don't get me wrong, I agree, prompts are important. We know how to respond, we know how to react and put our thoughts down on paper. But I feel like, and I'm guilty of this too as a young teacher, I feel like sometimes that's all I did, right? Like, was like, you need to respond to this, you need to respond to this, you need to respond to this. And I don't know that my prompts were always as free thinking as they should have been, if that makes sense. I don't know. So where you said it could be, a landform, like, that's a great prompt. Write about a landform that you would like to visit, because you're giving them prompt. They have to pick a landform, right? They have to write about why they want to visit there, but you're allowing them to pick the type of place they want to go.
Or, oftentimes students like to do a creative kind of writing. I was thinking with landforms, maybe they could create their own world. And in that world, you will have 3 of the landforms that we've discussed to draw it in detail, right? What makes, they would have to draw, what makes a volcano? I don't know. Just something like that, where they could, create their own imaginary area, but then include those things, or, draw a picture of some place where you have the 3 different types of properties of matter. You have your steam, your solid, and your liquid.
That's a good idea.
Hey, I know. We should. Hey, listen, we're getting close, so we're going to keep talking here. This article also talks about having low stakes writing, so it doesn't always have to be something I'm grade.
Right.
We use rubrics, not grading systems, but we use rubrics, but for writing. But this article is obviously addressing older students, but just to be able to have a free form. I remember a college course that I had, we had a journal in which we were required to write. It was for a writing course. Mm-hmm. We were required to journal on a daily basis. And what I found was, and the professor didn't read our journal. She just checked that it had an entry. She said she didn't read them. I don't know. She didn't she just went around. Maybe she's a speed reader. I don't know. But I had found by the time I was done with that course, I was a better writer as a result. And knowing that I could write without having to necessarily have somebody critique my writing gave me more opportunity to try other things. So creating that moment, I think, and I kind of do believe that is a writer's workshop. That is what writer's workshop is about, that low stakes. They are trying things out. and we're not going to worry about going back and correcting. We're just going to give you the next tool to be better. I feel like that is definitely a low stakes kind of writing.
Yeah, I like the quote in this article too. So the low stakes part is talking about I think 7th grade science teacher. So yes, it's talking about older grade levels, but this could easily be applied to the primary age. It says the teacher is quoted as saying it's just about them getting their own ideas down and then being able to interact with those ideas, change them, and revise them if they're not correct. And I think that's a great way to just think about that. Like it's really simply about the kids getting their ideas down on paper for low stakes writing. And I think your journal idea that your college professor had you do is a perfect thing, and I know I did something similar to that. We called it our weekend journal, right? Like, and every Monday they came in and we just wrote, like, for our morning quote unquote work, right? Their morning work on Mondays was draw a picture. And if you can, write some sentences or write some words or label it about what you did over the weekend. And it's them getting their own ideas down. And then we shared those and in our morning meeting time, we talked about what they did over the weekend, and we used some speaking and listening skills to do that. But I had them put their ideas on paper first.
Right.
And it was really cool. I know not that we were necessarily revising those, but it was so cool as we went throughout the year. Number one, to see the growth of that, right? Like, on the first couple of weeks of school, it was a picture of them playing outside, right? And every child did that. Like, I played outside. But then as we started talking about details and then really detailing their work, you saw students starting to share their journals before we ever got to that point. Like, they were starting to have conversations, what did you do this weekend? What did you do this weekend? And talking about it, which if you do this as somewhat of a routine, and you introduce these journals as this is just what we're going to do. Like, it's an important part of our day rather than waiting until, our curriculum tells us to creatively write, right? Just let them do it from day one, get their ideas down. And I think, from my experience, that's when those things about, changing their ideas or revising their ideas, that's going to come naturally, because you're going to start to see them fixing their words as they grow into a writer, or kind of adding that more detail to their picture as a writer on their own when it's just common practice in your classroom.
Right. Yeah. You can always tell when you go visit another classroom who has writing in their classroom on a routine basis and who just started it a week before you came to visit. Like, I would say that, like, you can see who's like, this is routine or this is our way of life. It is something that, when you first start teaching writing and you start making it part of your, embedded in your instruction, it's hard at first. I always, every year when I would start writer's workshop, I would think, this year it's not going to work. Not with these, I would have those negative self-talk in there that this is not going to work. This is so hard. I don't ever remember it being this hard, blah, blah, blah. And then, 5 weeks later, I'm like, this is amazing. And this is the best thing ever. And all of a sudden we're in that sweet spot again, where it's not such a challenge. We just got to get over that hump,
That's why I always say that, like, this is like creative writing, and workshop style is one of those things. I know a lot of listeners, if you're like me, you're thinking, oh my God, especially now in 2021, like, I don't have time to do a workshop in my day, right? Like, I wish, and not that I want to, like, elementary school to become like a junior high or high school block schedule, but I always said, like, if there was an opportunity to just teach writing, like, I don't have to worry about anything else today, but I could just take a group of kids and that's all I taught all day long was writing and strategies and stories and writing books. Like, I would love that position, like, if I could just be like kind of like reading interventionists, like if there was a writing teacher for elementary, I would jump on that on a heartbeat just to get kids to explore,
Right. One of the things though that it's tough is that it's not, writing is not taught in isolation. It's a combination of all the other types of, in your reading. It's just a combination of those lessons. So that makes it really hard for elementary, which is why compartmentalized instruction sometimes can be really challenging.
Yes.
When it's done in those early grades, when we're still trying to build those skills needed to learn versus learning content in those older grades.
Like I always know says when someone that's an older grades teacher says like, "Oh, I'm a math teacher. What do you teach?" And I'm like, well, "I teach that too, but I also teach reading, writing, math, science,
Right.
social skills, all that stuff." Because
Right.
elementary teachers, we do it all.
We do all of it. Some stuff, no, I don't do so well. The last example that they had in here, they had Student Center magazine, which I think would be kind of fun to do a classroom magazine.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool idea.
Writing, and their example was sort of back to what we were talking about before, these wonder journals. Like if you were going to create an animal for this particular habitat, what would it look like? What would it eat? What color would it be? Those kinds of things. I think that would be that's a kind of a tangible example as well. Or, lots of different, if you were going to build a home in this area, what kinds of things would you want it to have, or that sort of thing. So I thought that there were some great ways to, beyond just learning content and reflecting on what you just learned. Right.
I think what you just said about the animals too is just proof that like we haven't really, I don't think we talked about math a little bit, but
right.
You didn't say like during science you could do this, but when you think about all these different writing prompts and writing styles, they kind of naturally fall into your other subjects. We don't have to say like, "Oh my gosh, today and we're going to do our writing during science." It just happens naturally, right? Like when you do an example like you just said of the animal in the habitat. I know Trisha, my wife in second grade, they were working on persuasive writing. And instead of just doing a lesson, she did a mini lesson, right? But then they tied it into animal science, because what they did is they wrote persuasive stories or persuasive essays, if that's a word you want to use in second grade, to the administration, dissertations, to the administration about why they should be able to get a classroom pet. And the ideas were amazing. The pictures the kids were drawing about how they could take care of it. And they really got creative, if we want to talk about creative writing, about their reasons why. Yes, they were trying to persuade someone, but they were also practicing creative writing skills, because they were coming up with all these reasons and creative ideas of how a classroom pet would enhance their learning. And it was so amazing to read. And not that the principal like got them a pet, but our assistant principal, who is amazing, Ashley, got them. She, like a lot of the kids, they kind of conformed to the idea that they were going to get a rabbit. That was what they wanted, was a class pet rabbit. So our principal one weekend went on Amazon and bought this realistic looking stuffed rabbit, books on how to take care of rabbits, stories about rabbits. And when they came to school on Monday, she had that stuff sitting on Trisha's desk and said, "Here is your new classroom pet." And the kids treated that stuffed rabbit like it was a real classroom pet. But I just thought, I'm like, what a genius way to introduce persuasive writing in a creative format, without you must write about this, or you must persuade someone this. She let them come up with something they had been talking about anyway, and tied it into animal science, tied it into, how to take care of animals. And it was one of those lessons that sticks with me. And I wasn't even in the class,
I as you're talking, I'm thinking about our friend Lori Elliott's book about PBL, right? Project-based learning, and writing letters to the principal asking for this particular project to be approved, or so all of those things are kind of amazing. One thing I wanted to leave you, there was a book that I love that I'll go ahead and link in, but it's a book about wonder as well. So it's a professional book. And I think maybe we could even pop in Lori's book about PBL.
Yeah.
I think that kind of fits in there as well. So I think we've gotten to the end of the article, but I just do think it's a great subject that you could, they could work on their vocabulary. There's so many skills that they could add into this writing kind of throughout their day. Because I think we know as adults, we sure write all day long, don't we?
We do. And I love that in the subtitle of the article, it's just, these are strategies to use in all subjects. So I know we talked a lot about science or whatnot, but think about the ways you could include wonder journals or travel journals or creative writing into anything that you're doing throughout your day. I know a lot of you are thinking right now, well, I've got so much going on in my virtual space, but I also think that maybe this is a good time to try it, right? Like the kids are at home, instead of assigning another work page or a worksheet, have them write about what's going on in their life at home right now, or write about what they did over the weekend, or write about, maybe it's, if you could go back in time and stop the pandemic, what would you do? What would you create to stop this from happening, right? Like there are so many creative things we could do based around what's going on right now.
And honestly, the tools that we talked about in the past, the digital tools that are available, you could do it. You could do it in Seesaw. You could do it in Google Classroom.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Or they can do it on a piece of paper because paper and pencil still works. So that would be an awesome way to kind of convey that back and forth. So,
right. Well, thanks for finding that article, Deedee. That was a good one. I'm glad I got to see it.
Me too. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.